Hatch, thank you very much this afternoon for coming and speaking with us in one of our video casts that we are doing as part of the Consilium Institute. Our series on Thinking Boldly is talking with people from around the country who are experts in helping families restructure. And we're just very, very excited to have you here, Jen Hatch, to talk with us about your expertise, including in particular your background in mediation, collaborative divorce, and your experiences with domestic violence. So I am Judge Julie Field, and I want to welcome everyone who's listening here today to our amazing colleague, expert, and tapestry member, Jennifer Hatch. I am a co-founder along with Heidi Webb of the Consilium Institute, and just very, very excited to bring these bold ideas in family law to the world. So Heidi, anything that you would like to add?
I'd just like to welcome Jen and welcome our audience to our podcast series. We're really happy to have you with us. We are entering sort of a new phase of our own development at Consilium Institute. We are bringing together our tapestry of wise advisors. The term Consilium actually comes from ancient Greek and means wise advisors or council of wise advisors. And we are gathering those great thinkers in our community and bringing them to you. So we hope we know that you will enjoy this podcast today. And we hope we have you as listeners for a long time to come. So welcome to everybody.
All right. Welcome, Jennifer. Let me just briefly, if I could, Jennifer, just introduce you to our listeners. You are the founder of J. Hatch Law, LLC in 2020, and you have been practicing law for almost 20 years and started first as an assistant district attorney, and then you were in private practice, and I think significantly then a legal services attorney in representing individuals in abusive relationships in probate and family court cases in Massachusetts. And one of the things that I've always really, really appreciated about you, Jennifer, in the time that I've gotten to know you, is that you really seem to focus your clients on leading them through their divorce experience in a way that empowers them to make sound decisions for not just their legal, financial, but also their personal and life futures. And I think that your experience and training, particularly with collaborative and mediation work, and your experience with survivors of domestic violence, really has helped to inform that. So we're just thrilled to have you here, have you as part of the Tapestry Network, and can't wait to start this conversation with you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, it's delightful to have you here.
So let me just ask, sort of as an opening, question, just to ask you in your own words to kind of describe your vision of the work that you do as someone who helps families through the restructuring process.
Thank you, Julie. What is most important to me when I work with my clients is that they understand what's going on, whether it's they understand the issues before them, the decisions they need to make, the challenges that are ahead, that they understand the process that they're in, whether it's literally physically in the courtroom, whether it's in a mediation room, whether it's just sitting across from me or next to me talking. They have to understand what their role is in these moments. So it's not just about, for me, that they know what the law is or what the law says about their situation in that moment. It's about understanding the experience in the broader context, what their relationship is to me, what their relationship is to the court, to opposing counsel or their spouse's counsel. and what their relationship will be like with their spouse, either in not either in that both in that moment and in the future. So it's important to me that my clients are always understanding what is going on, and that means that they're educated, and that means that they feel empowered. When they understand what's going on, they feel empowered. And only then can you really make decisions. And these are important decisions that they're making.
Mhm. So, how does how does collaborative law and the work that you do with collaborative law fit into the vision of what you do with your clients, and how does it dovetail, if it does, with the Consilium process?
It dovetails quite a bit. I think I really identify with Heidi's description of concilium meaning wise advisors. I think that's where it dovetails very well in collaborative law, because the purpose of collaborative law is for the process to be a team approach, for the divorce process to be a team approach, to have individuals at the table who are working with you and your spouse to restructure your family, your parenting plan, your financial future. A lot of changes are happening, and the two parties cannot always, most of the time, cannot do that on their own. They need accountants, they need financial advisors, you know, people who are on the Concilium team as well, who have trained in this process. They need a mediator, referred to as a coach in the collaborative process, and they need two attorneys who are committed to having them succeed in the future. So rather than an attorney who's focused on their own client's success, you want the two attorneys to actually desire success for both parties. That does
Mhm,
not discount their ability to advocate for their own client. Um, it actually enhances the ability to make something work that's going to be successful in the future. If one
mhm,
party is successful, that doesn't necessarily mean the whole family is going to be successful, right? So when the two attorneys are seeing the big picture, seeing the whole, seeing both parties' success, then that drives everyone forward. So that's the process. Um, the reason why Concilium works well in that is because as an attorney who's working with my client, I am focused on um, my clients' goals in their life, the goals for not just their own financial future, but the goals for their relationships with their children, the goals with their relationships with their former spouse, soon to be co-parent, um, how they want to move through the world in this new way. Um, so that's not just about the law. That's not just about, do I get the house? Do I get the retirement fund? Do I get these stocks? It's about it's about dignity, how I want to behave in front of my children, in front of and with my spouse, former spouse, and what is where's my integrity and where's my dignity in all of this. And so I think it's important for me to understand my clients' overall goals, not just what they want out of the divorce, but their overall goals in their new life. And that's how I can work with the other attorney and work with the other spouse in achieving a separation agreement that helps
mhm,
them fulfill that.
Can you distinguish in your own mind? And it's sometimes these things are, in evolution, so it's hard to sort of
Mhm.
break them down in your own mind. But can you distinguish how concilium informs you in a collaborative process as opposed to how you approach the collaborative process before you were a concilium practitioner?
So before I was a Consilium practitioner, and I was working collaboratively with another attorney, it's challenging. It's a paradigm. Let me start with the collaborative process is a paradigm shift, because when you are a traditional attorney, you're focused on your client's rights and their obligations and achieving what they want within reason with what the law allows, um, given the circumstances of um, your family and your financial circumstance. And so when you enter the collaborative process, this team approach, um, it's hard to let go of that control, maybe
Mhm,
is the right word for it,
Mhm.
and stop and listen to what the other side has to say and think about um, how you could work with making that happen as well as what your client wants.
mhm,
And then speaking to the other side in a manner that's not positional. So
Mhm.
my client's position is X. What is your client's position? This is our counter offer. Sort of very formulaic. So there's a lot of focus, or I used to focus a lot on moving through that process in a way that didn't screw it up, to be honest.
Okay.
um, so Concilium has eased that burden for me a little bit, has made it easier for me because it reinforces this idea of council of wise advisors, and it reinforces what I believed all along is that I'm really just focusing on achieving a successful life for my client post divorce. And again, rather than like, well, my client wants 3 days a week and not 4 days a week, right? In the parenting plan, I'm just trying to have my client
Mhm.
succeed in the future and um, feel good about what the outcome was.
Mhm.
I want to preface that it's not just feel good, because sometimes attorneys say that in litigation, like, you walk out with an outcome that you can live with. I want my client to thrive. I want my client to see a better future for themselves and their kids. And so if I keep my eyes on that goal, and remind my client of the same, it becomes easier to have those conversations with opposing counsel,
Mhm.
or what I like to say now, it's the other spouse's counsel. I often with my attorneys really try my clients. I often try to refer to the other attorney as attorney so and so, or your husband's counsel or your wife's counsel, and
Mhm.
I really try to not use the word um, opposing counsel. And then, even if appropriate, I might say the first name of the other side, depending on the circumstances. But um, I also want to add that one of the reasons why I believe in the concept of a team approach and council, as what they call it in collaborative, or council of wise advisors that we call it in Concilium, is because as a legal service attorney who worked exclusively with clients in abusive relationships, the clients that thrived both during the litigation process and afterwards were the ones that had essentially a team of supporters. They
Mm.
had social workers. They might have had supportive family members, positive supportive family members that would assist in caring for the children. They had language interpreters, cultural and language interpreters. They
mhm.
had housing specialists, which I draw a parallel to real estate lawyers, not real estate lawyers, real estate agents and mortgage
Mortgage
lending
loan.
specialists.
Oh,
You know,
right.
I mean, if someone is in a low income situation, they might have a housing specialist that's working with them to secure housing. And so now, even though I'm not working with low income families anymore, they still need that team. They still need the mortgage lending advisors. They still need the
Mhm.
knowledgeable real estate agents. They still need supportive family. They need financial advisors. Uh, they need a therapist, all of which are similar to social workers who do a variety of different types of work. So when you have a team who are assisting you with all of these offshoots and challenges that you're having when you're going through the divorce process, which doesn't matter whether you're mid-level, high level, or low income, those are the people that thrive, who embrace that team, who use that team, who have really the privilege of a team.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's really well said. I think that the hearing you talk about sort of the team model with collaborative and how Concilium works sort of in that model and knowing it also works in a litigation model or a mediation
Mhm.
model, but that it's sort of your frame of reference that sort of allows you to then educate and shift your client's perspective and
Mhm.
bring to the table, regardless of whether or not the other attorney is Consilium trained at that point.
Right. Right.
It still allows you to sort of be the fulcrum for that changed
Mhm.
conversation.
Right.
And I think that's really
And
powerful.
you started your own firm about 4 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic.
Which was totally a coincidence.
You didn't cause the pandemic, is that what you're saying? It wasn't
No,
you?
I
It
mean, I
wasn't your
didn't
fault?
do it because of the pandemic like many people did. I
Oh,
was
okay. So what lessons have you taken from, going from working in institutional settings, right? Like the DA's office or I mean, legal aid is not really an institutional setting, but it's a more of a law firm type setting, right? Where you're dealing with a particular population or in private practice to starting your own firm. What were the challenges that you saw when you made that transition, and how did you want to how did you choose to position yourself in the work that you're doing now? Does that question make sense?
um, it does. So I think the most relevant challenge I faced, the most relevant to this conversation that I faced was I was known as a litigator. That's really all that I had done. Um, and my cases were uh, contentious, emotionally challenging, they were
Mhm,
stressful. Um, and when I opened up the practice, uh, my intent was to not litigate cases anymore. So I knew that would take time to accomplish, and I'm almost there, where none of my cases are litigated because essentially litigation means fighting. Um, so that meant that I had to convince that people who called me that I could resolve their case without fighting, and B, that should be something they want to do. Because I think people's first instinct is to fight. They wanna fight,
mhm,
and
mhm,
and not everybody can be convinced uh, that it's possible to not fight and still resolve their case and accomplish most of what they want. Some people can't do that, and there's a variety
mhm,
of reasons why. There might be mental health issues, there might be trauma, um, there might be honest ish questions of law, questions of fact that need to be hashed out. So I don't necessarily fault everybody who feels that they need to go through the litigation process. I absolutely do not fault that. I do think that court can be empowering for some people and that it's a good resource when appropriate. But as experienced family law lawyers such as yourselves come to realize is most of the family law cases do not need to be fought or in court.
mhm,
And so that those were the challenges is first convincing other people, including my network, uh, people who only knew me as a litigator, that I only wanted to do cases where there was no fighting, and then convincing the people who called me seeking my services that if they wanted to fight, I was not the right attorney for them anymore,
mhm,
but that I could achieve a resolution for them without fighting. So that was the biggest challenge.
mhm. Let me ask a quick question, which is,
Yeah.
how do you so in family law, like you said, the clients come in and many of them are, primed for fighting, right?
Battle. Right.
Um, but um, there, as you said, there have to be some times when there are disagreements that can't be resolved between the parties. And so there may need to be some litigation. So
Right.
how do you with this transition to trying to move things towards a more collaborative, using the collaborative process, using mediation, using your Consilium skills, how do you handle or address those times when there is a need to, I'm not even going to call it a need to fight, but when there is a
Right.
disagreement that somebody else needs to resolve?
Yeah. Um, so I think the very formulaic response is, or the way I approach it that might sound formulaic is, I mean, first when somebody calls me, um, they usually call me with two ideas. Either I have to go to court and fight this situation, or my spouse is so difficult, but I would really just like to resolve this. And actually, there is a third call. The third caller is usually saying, my client and I, my husband or wife and I have come to a bunch of agreements, and I just want to talk to you about whether that those agreements work, if they're good. So that's great. Like the third caller, they've had a conversation. They're both on the same page. They need to separate, um, and they've come to a bunch of agreements. So, first I let them know, like, I'm not just a rubber stamper. I'm not just going to rubber stamp all these agreements. I do want to know what these agreements are and why you think they're a good idea. And so that, of course, starts the journey. So, and then I think the second, let me go back. The second thing that I ask about is, um, um, what these agreements are and why they think they're a good idea. And then the person who calls me and says I need to fight my spouse is, so difficult. Okay. And then the third caller, will say, I want to solve this. Through mediation, or just as a
Mhm.
joint divorce. I just don't know how my spouse is going to respond. In all three of those situations, I always first ask, what they want, what they want, and why they want it, and then I ask what they think their spouse wants,
Mm,
and why they want it. So in the call where, they have an agreement, they have a bunch of agreements. I want to understand, well, the context for these agreements, because I think that's where you also might learn, Julie, about where there might be coercive control,
mhm.
where there's a lack of education or information on both sides, not just my
Sure.
potential client. Um, a lack of factual knowledge, certainly lack of legal knowledge, but and where there's assumptions on both parties. And then in the second example, I might focus a little bit more. The second example being somebody says, I wanna resolve this quote unquote amicably, but I don't know how my spouse is gonna respond. I ask a lot of questions about their spouse. Um, and this might be where you learn there's some mental health issues. There's
Mm,
maybe there's a history of violence or a course of control. Uh, you know, I think certainly I say mental health issues, but sometimes depression can be a huge
mm,
challenge. And then in the third context, it's the same thing. I want to discern if someone says, my spouse is so difficult, we're going to have to go to court. I actually want to know a little bit more about my client, my potential
mm,
client,
mm, mhm,
because why do they? I sometimes think it might be them that wants to fight and not necessarily the other side. So I'm learning a little bit about that. Um, in all of these situations, I can figure out, or I like to think, I can figure out their capacity to go through either the collaboration or the mediation process. And then that's when I explain each process, the litigation process, the collaboration, the collaborative process, and the mediation process, the pros and cons to both. And while I might not tell them, you wouldn't work for the mediation process, or you definitely need to be in court. I'm more saying, I more say to them, this is where the mediation process works really well when both persons are committed. They're motivated to making that process work. They're able to give information voluntarily and freely without having court deadlines or an attorney telling them they have to. Um, that's where the mediation process might work best. Is that something that you think would work in your situation? And sometimes they say, "Oh yeah, no, I think that'll be fine." But oftentimes they'll actually say, "No, that won't work." So they self-select a little bit, and then we talk about the collaborative process. That's sort of a
Mhm.
little bit in between a litigation, where there's some deadlines, there's some accountability, there's some structure. And then again, they're usually very intrigued by that option. And sometimes in those scenarios, I might write a letter to the other side and introduce the idea. And then, of course, there's a litigation situation where if I do think that there's coercive control or serious mental health issues that might make it very difficult for the other side to effectively participate in the collaborative or mediation process, um, I do talk about the benefits of litigation,
Mhm.
but that it's important that they have a lawyer that's not going to exasperate the litigious behavior, because
Mhm.
the other side will. So
Mhm.
you don't want to hire somebody who, if you call them and they say, "I want to fight," and that person responds with, "Yeah, let's," in so many words, "Yeah, absolutely. You're totally entitled to that. Let's do that. I'm going to get that for you." Um, you're then going to be fighting fire with fire. So
Mhm.
you want to have somebody who is going to take the temperature down, because the process is going to be challenging, and you need somebody who's going to be. I like it to a marathon and not a sprint. Like, the litigation process is a marathon. You got to pace yourself, go at a steady pace, remain focused. It's not a race. It's not a sprint. Um, you know, it's a marathon.
Mhm.
I think it's interesting when you talk about people calling and saying they want to fight. I think a lot of people fear a consequence and think that fighting is their best
Right.
defense. And you said that beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like when I listen to you talk, Jennifer, what one of the things you really focus on is education and making sure that your clients are really understanding what their options are. And I know that you recently were trained as a Consilium consultant. Um, can you tell people what that is, what it means, and how maybe it dovetails with that passion that you have for education?
Yeah, I think a consultant. So the traditional model, when somebody calls an attorney and they want to consult, it's usually a brief conversation, or maybe it's an hour where where you're getting to know the attorney and their approach, and you're sharing with them. The client is sharing with the attorney their situation, and their questions, and that's a fine model, and and it will continue to be the model, but for many, but it's not the best model. So what I was experiencing is, let's go back to the challenge you mentioned, Julie, about the challenge when I opened up my
Mhm.
own practice. When I was a legal
Yeah.
services attorney, which was most of my career, I did not have to worry about billing. So if somebody called me for a consult, I could spend a couple of hours with them on the phone before they ever hired me. And sometimes I
Mhm.
would even have more than one phone conversation with them. Um, I also had I could also still identify that person as a client for legal services purposes, without necessarily representing them in court. So
Mm.
um, I mean, there was a fine line there, but the point is that I didn't have to worry so much about the concept of time equals money. So when I started my own practice, people's desire is just to talk to an attorney for as long as they possibly can. And that is very understandable. Okay. I do not fault that. I totally understand why, but it's just not sustainable. Um, it's just not possible, um, unfortunately. So in it just became so apparent to me that when someone comes to you, they come with several assumptions from movies, from books, just like Heidi said a little while ago, from talking to their friends who got divorced, or friends of friends who got divorced,
Mhm.
from researching on the internet.
Oh, gosh.
They come with so many assumptions that feed their statements and their questions. And they also don't fully understand sometimes, what the attorney's role is. Okay. And, um, and so when you're having this conversation, and then they have lots of anxieties, they have these immediate pressing questions that they need answers. And I really sympathize with that. But as you know, an attorney's response is always like, well, it depends. They have a question, well, it depends. Some of the things, in answering that question, I'll need to consider this and I would need to know this. And um, this is something that the judge is this is what's going to be important to the judge. And they can't get those immediate answers. And they don't really understand. They leave after that hour and they're still not sure why they can't get those answers. Um, and they're still leaving with all of those assumptions in that, because that hour is not enough. It's just not. And um, now this is not for every client, potential client. I mean, there are certainly some clients that don't quite come with the level of assumptions and anxiety that I describe. But there is enough that do to make me realize that there has to be a better approach to the consultation process when you're in private practice. Again, I didn't have to worry about this when I was in legal services, but in private practice I do. And so that's where I think the Consilium consultation addresses that problem. Is you retain me, uh, not just for that 1 hour consultation, but you really retain me to plan your divorce, to figure out what to do, to figure out what the right process is for you, to figure out who your team players should be, and what the right ones for you are. So I literally will provide you names of individuals that I think might be a good fit, for you to follow up with and interview yourself. We also talk about what the challenges will be. Okay, so you came to me and you think the primary challenge will be financial support, for you, alimony or child support, when as we talk further I might say actually the biggest challenge is really XYZ, and I think the financial support issue is not going to be so prevalent. um, so you're going to have a list of the issues. And then the other thing I do is I highlight the facts that are relevant. Because again, sometimes folks walk into the office and they believe that they know what facts are relevant. And, but in the final product, I'm going to identify, for your team, your future divorce team, what I suggest are going to be the relevant facts. And in this process, you're becoming educated. Um, and you're going to enter the experience more prepared. One example, two examples I have is when people go for surgery, they'll or they have a serious medical issue. They speak to multiple doctors, and I understand that sometimes people speak to multiple attorneys, but um, you have a surgery plan. And I think the other example too is when you build a house, like you have an architect, you have a plan, and you have your engineer, and you have your plumber, and the general contractor. And what's interesting about divorce is people just say, I hired my friend's attorney, or I had the attorney my father recommended. Um, and they don't have a plan at all.
Mm.
Uh, and I'm just not sure why we operate that way.
Hmm.
No, I think that's a terrific point. And I think that,
Yeah.
there's a sort of, I don't know, history of lawyers being sort of in charge of the process, and
Yes. Yeah.
clients sort of are along for the ride, but it's upside down because it's the client's life. And not that the
Hmm.
attorney should just be along for the ride, but if the client doesn't even know where the train's going, that's somewhat problematic. They don't know the stops, they don't know if there are overnights,
Right.
they don't know
Right.
anything about this.
Right.
So they get on board, and often, at least in my experience, people sort of 3, 4, 6 months in are like, wow, I didn't know it was going to be like
Hmm.
this. I'm not
Right.
sure I would have, gotten on this train.
Hmm.
So that's, the consultant sort of is everything you're saying, and they're able to sort of give you that long range view and
Yeah.
say, does this look like a
Maybe,
road you
yeah, and maybe
want?
it's a little bit like the general contractor analogy. And actually, that I think where I was going at with the doctor analogy is a while back, your doctor would just say
Yeah,
what you need to do, right? But now we have patient bill of rights, and we have patient
sure.
empowerment, and
Yeah.
that's a big thing now.
Hmm.
Um, and I but I feel like we haven't quite caught up in the same manner.
No.
And this is not to say, okay, because I've also had clients come to me and try to tell me what to do. Right? That's, empowerment doesn't mean you tell the attorney what to do.
Right.
Right?
If people want to use you as a Consilium consultant, what, how do they contact you? How do they reach out? What can they expect with their first conversation with you?
So, with their first conversation, I mean, you can call me, you can email me. What I do is my legal assistant will follow up with you. I mean, I might follow up with you directly, but the person who's going to make our appointment is my legal assistant. And we'll talk for about 15 minutes. I try to keep it to 15 minutes, but oftentimes it goes up to 30 minutes. But you get to know me, and what I do and my approach um, to handling uh, your case, for lack of a better term, and how I work with other attorneys, how I approach and speak with other lawyers. Because again, some people want, they get nervous if you're nice to your spouse's attorney. They think that that's not good lawyering, but and so we just make sure, and I learn a little bit about what you're looking for, and then I propose a consultation. In most scenarios, I think a full concilium consultation is most appropriate. That does not mean I force my potential client to do that. I do think there are some circumstances where if the conversation needs to be longer, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we both agree it's a good fit, and we make a plan, and I'm retained, or perhaps the person needs to think about it, and then they call me back and retain me. But if somebody has more questions, more often than not, I am finding a concilium consult is really most appropriate. But if it's not, I will suggest another consultation meeting for specific purposes,
Mhm.
um, and then we can go from there.
You have talked about the lessons that you have learned from your favorite movie. And I love the lessons that you shared with Heidi and me just before we got on. So,
Okay.
would you talk about that a little bit, and the lessons what your favorite movie is and what lessons you've taken from that?
Well, I would say at the moment, I don't know if it's my all-time favorite movie, but I will say that recently my husband and I stumbled across the Karate Kid, which I think it's 84, 1984. Um, I mean, we certainly saw it at 1984, but we just went late one night. It was on TV, and we started watching it, and I thought we'd fall asleep or we'd shut it off early, but we watched the whole thing. And afterwards, I was like, "That is still a really good movie." And my husband was like, "Yeah." And so we showed it to our kids, age 10, 11. And even again, like the second time, it's such a great movie. And I'm sure, with the passage of time, you could find maybe some cultural inappropriateness, but social inappropriateness. I don't know, but the it is a very simple movie. I think it's very simple, and there are so many lessons in it that um, really embody what I do and what I hope my children will learn. I mean, some of the messages that stand out are patience.
Mhm.
How important it is to be patient, which goes back to like my marathon analogy that the divorce process is a marathon. You've got to be patient. And even one example in one of my very, very difficult cases when I first opened my practice, when I was still doing a few litigation cases, it was so, so difficult. And not only was my client losing her mind, but I was losing my mind. And I just
Mhm.
said, we have to remember that we got to keep our head down and focus on your goals. And if they want to spin their wheels and if they want to work themselves up into a frenzy and if they want to get angry, and we can let them do it, but that doesn't mean that we have to do that as well. We just have to have patience. There is going to be an end to this, and we just need to be patient. And so that's a lot of, Karate Kid talks about that, or exemplifies that, I think, in the story. The
Mhm.
other thing is aggression. Power does not mean aggression. You don't have to be. I think the most obvious theme in the story is that power does not come from aggression, basically, and that you can be powerful without being aggressive.
Mhm.
And I think another important story is assumptions. Making assumptions about others can hurt you uh, just as much as it hurts them. I think all of these apply in the divorce process, really, in the legal process, in the court process. You need to have patience. You shouldn't make assumptions because that
Mhm.
wastes your energy, and it inhibits your ability to make good decisions. And I think that again, aggression does not equal power.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of other lessons in the movie, but those are the ones that stand out to me.
That's amazing. Thank you.
I love that. It's great.
There's also a moment in the movie where Daniel gets very angry because his teachers make him do all his work. And so he obviously makes the assumption that his teacher's taking advantage of him. And so he sort of explodes, right? Instead of just
Mhm.
pausing and asking why, he just explodes. And so that's not an effective use of his energy. And then so finally, the teacher demonstrates for him why he's doing all this work. Um, and because it's teaching him the physical
Right.
skills that he needs. And so
Mhm.
um, again, it goes back to we get so angry when we're going through a divorce, understandably so. Um, but that's not helping you. That anger's not helping you move forward and reaching your full potential. So, I mean, all of these things are certainly easier said than done, but that's what you gotta remember.
Great
Mhm.
lessons, and I definitely want to watch the movie now.
Right, same, same.
It's great.
So, um, one of the things you also shared with me that I just found so powerful was where you get your inspiration from and where you find inspiration in ways that I think not everybody would identify the way that you have. So, can you talk about that a little bit? Who inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, my clients, most of my clients. I mean, I can't say every single one of them, but I can certainly say there's been quite a few clients that inspire me. I mean, when they change maybe a little bit through the process, when they come to me distraught, uh, traumatized, angry, full of demands and assumptions. And then as the process moves on, you see them learn, like they're learning. They're not only learning from me, but learning from what's going on around them. And, through trial and error. And then they start to have this shift where they start to sort of be what I like to call the beacon in the process. Like that, you want everyone to follow you. You want your behavior and you want to model the integrity and the behavior that you want to see in your children and in your spouse. Um, and sometimes, and my clients are doing this, but the ones that do it under extraordinarily difficult scenarios, maybe their house is in foreclosure and they're losing their home and they need to find a new one. Maybe there's a serious medical issue that they need to contend with. Maybe they've just lost their job, or maybe there's a companion criminal case going on, and their spouse, is the perpetrator and they're the victim, and they're going to these criminal trials. They're going to criminal court at the same time we're trying to move through the divorce process. I mean, that is incredibly, incredibly stressful. And when they can move through the process with some grace and dignity and make uh, good decisions. And uh, even when the outcome is not so great, when they can accept it and recognize that it's not the whole, that uh, they still have a positive life in front of them. That there's still more important things that they've achieved than that maybe one particular thing that was so important to them in the beginning. um, is just amazing to me.
Beautifully said.
Well,
Yeah.
and one of the things you said, Jennifer, is that you were talking about the clients being the beacon, and having that vision. Um, Based on the conversation that we've had today, it's clear to me that you yourself are a beacon of hope and knowledge for those clients that come to you. And the education and support and help and care that you give them is something that is unique, I think, to you. And I really appreciate all of the amazing work that you do. If people want to find you, your website is www.jhatchlaw.com. And just quick summary, Jen, what services, if they come to you, what can they expect in terms of the type of services that you can provide to
Yep.
a client who is looking for that beacon of hope and knowledge in their divorce?
So the primary services I provide are being a Consilium consultant. If you're at the beginning of your divorce and you're not sure how to start, having a Consilium consultation is a great place to start. The second primary service I offer is I represent clients through the mediation process. So if you're thinking about if you're thinking about using mediation as your divorce process, and you need to find a mediator, you need a lawyer, and your husband needs a lawyer, or you would like one. I love doing that. I love representing people through the mediation process.
Mhm.
And that's not having a lawyer and doing mediation are not inconsistent with each other. So it's important people, again, make the assumption that you don't need a lawyer. You shouldn't have a lawyer if you're going through mediation. You're not required to have a lawyer, but people assume you shouldn't have one, and that's I would say that's a myth, because you can make more informed decisions, your anxiety can be reduced, and you increase your likelihood of success when you present your
Mhm.
agreement to the court. So the other piece I do is a collaborative divorce. So it can either be a full collaborative, formal uh, process choice where you have a complete team, or it can be somewhat informal. I have clients right now who, excuse me, I have a client right now, there and their spouse started in the mediation process, but then it just informally became more of a collaborative approach where everybody was meeting together, the
Hmm.
financial advisor, the mediator, the attorneys, and we were working on the divorce. So it became a collaborative case sort of organically. So, and then the third thing is if it's just two attorneys working out a joint divorce together, where the parties are committed to that, perhaps they don't need a mediator. Perhaps it's just two good attorneys who have the same belief system and approach. Then we can accomplish that. The bottom line is I don't litigate in court, but I can resolve your case through these other methods.
Lovely. I heard recently somebody refer to everything that you're talking about is often referred to as alternative dispute resolution, but I heard somebody actually refer to it as appropriate dispute resolution, which I thought
Mm,
was so much better. Um,
right,
instead of
That's great.
it's the
right.
other, it's
Yeah,
Yeah,
what's appropriate.
right.
yeah. Well,
Well,
Jennifer, thank you for your time today. Thank you for being a beacon of hope and knowledge and education, and an integral member of the tapestry community. And I'm really excited to see where things go for you next.
Thank you.
thank you.